Hello once again, this is How To Bob, and in this video I'm going to change the clutch on a 2002 Honda Shadow Sabre. That's the VT 1100. So the very first step is to drain the oil. Now I have a video on YouTube here on how to change the oil if you're not sure on how to do that, but that's going to be the first thing we're going to do. So once all the oil is out, we're going to have to remove the right side exhaust pipe so that we can gain access. There's 3 points where this chrome cover that I'm going to remove is attached. One here in the center, one here at the top, and then there'll be one more spot that just this chrome cover is held on right here in the bottom, and then I can just simply pull it off. You see the 3 spots here, and it hooks in at the top. So then I can take my actual pipe off, 2 bolts going into the engine, and I found this to be the easiest way to get access to the right cover, least amount of parts to remove. So I'm going to take my flanges and just slide them down. And then there's 2 bolts down here on this clamping ring where the pipe meets the muffler. Once those are all loose, get that out of the way, I can gently work back and forth my pipe and pull it forward, and that takes that off. Now I'm going to be removing all of these bolts around my right side crank, and I'm going to use a hex bolt, a hex driver here, and just remove all those. Now I've got them all removed, I'm going to gently pry, and I use a rag so I don't scratch my chrome. Just gently pry and work it back and forth until my cover comes off, and once that comes off, I can start taking out the clutch springs. There's 5 clutch springs in this particular model. I'm going to go ahead and take all 5 of them out. And once I get all of my clutch springs out, you can see that the old clutch spring on the left is a little shorter, and the one on the right has a little more compression. So I'm going to be in good shape once I get this done. So I'm going to take my pressure plate off here, and it looks like it's in pretty good shape. Then I'm going to begin to take off my friction rings and my steel clutch rings. They're alternating back and forth. You'll get a friction ring, then you'll get a steel ring, and I found these little hooks here, very useful to remove the friction rings and steel clutch rings once they're down in there. Very hard to reach, but gently, very gently, just hook them and pull them out, and it makes it real easy if you get one on either side. That way you have even pressure, and it just slides right out. And I keep them in order right underneath. That way when I go to replace them, I'm going to reuse the steel rings because they're still in good shape. Then I can put them back in with the new fiber rings and springs. Once I get my last clutch ring out, I'm going to inspect the inner basket and make sure there's no debris, make sure everything's cleaned out and ready to reinstall my new clutch. So this is my last one, and everything looks good and clean inside here. So here's the clutch, and I've soaked my clutch rings in some clean oil for a while now. And you want to do that, you don't want to put them in dry. And then you simply just take the clutch rings, knock a little bit of the oil off of them, and slide them in to the clutch basket. And once they get in, you just push them back. Then you go to the steel ring, set that one off to the side, and go to the steel ring because I'm going to reuse those. And then I can get my next friction plate and slide that all the way back. And then I go to my stack and set my old friction plate, and I can get my steel plate in and just alternate back and forth. Now the very last friction plate that goes on will go in a little different in that there's little notches here, and you can see that it sits on the outside of those notches. And then I can go ahead and put my pressure plate back on, And I'm going to loosely put on my springs. I'm going to go ahead and put all my springs on first, and I'm going to loosely put on all the bolts for the clutch springs. And once I get all my clutch spring bolts put in, I can go ahead and tighten down all the bolts, and I'm going to do it in an alternating fashion, and then I will torque them down. And the torque specification says 106 inch-pounds on the clutch spring bolts. So once I get all those down to 106 inch-pounds, I'll be good to go. Next, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the old gasket, and I'm going to use some gasket remover. I'll spray that on and wipe around the outside until I get it good and clean. I've got my new gasket, so I'm going to go ahead and peel off the old one and go ahead and clean up the right side crank cover as well. Now that I've got it clean, you can see how clean it is here, I'm going to go ahead and put my gasket on, and I'm going to use some gasket dressing just to work it around, make sure that I don't have any leaks. I don't want any problems in the future, so I'll put a little bit on and smear it around with my fingers all the way around both sides of the gasket just to prevent any problems. Now you can see there's two dowels in the crankcase, one here and one here, and I'm going to put my gasket on those, and then I can take my right side crank cover and I can slide that up on there. And I'm going to put my bolts in loosely first, and then I'm going to come back through, and again it's going to use 106 inch-pounds of torque if you're using a torque wrench, and I'm going to do it in the star pattern. It's kind of like your tire. And last but not least, we're going to put some oil in. Don't forget to put the oil in. Then I'm going to work my exhaust back in. Now on the top of the flange, you'll notice there is a punch in there, a stamp in the flange. It says top. So I want to make sure that that part is facing up. And then the secondary flange, it's important that the two prongs are facing up, because that does help to hold the chrome cover on if your exhaust looks like this and it's still factory stock. So once I get those two up, I can go ahead and tighten my pipe back on, and that's a 12mm socket I'm using for this. Get that tight back and forth. Then I can go down and tighten my clamping ring down at the muffler. And you can see these two go on these two prongs here, these two slots go on the prongs. So I'm going to slide that into the prongs first. These are my three clips. They kind of hook on in three different places, and then they fold over the back of the pipe. And then the screw comes from the front to tighten them up. So I'm going to go ahead and put my two prongs on there, and I can just kind of squeeze and it'll pull the pipe. It'll kind of clamp down around the pipe. And then I can put my clamping clip, once I get this thing all tight all the way down, just clips right in. And I can put my clip in on the hook and then rotate it around and put my bolt in. And once I get that one tightened down, I can go ahead and put my next clip in here, put it on the hook, rotate it around, and then I can put my bolt in here. And this is using a hex driver on this, so I can just go ahead and tighten that down. Doesn't have to be super tight. And then last, I have my clamp back by the muffler part. So once I've got this one tightened up, that's all there is to replacing the clutch on a 2002 Honda Shadow Sabre. This is How To Bob. Thanks for watching.